Injury Reserve is a hip-hop group formed in 2013 by producer Parker Corey, Richie with a T, and Steppa J Groggs. Beginning with their mixtape Depth Chart in 2013 and EP Cooler Colors in 2014, they would find the sound most people know them for on what they perceive as their debut project, Live from the Dentist Office. Injury Reserve, and with their projects onwards, from Floss to Drive It Like It's Stolen to their self-titled debut album, they'd come to be known for both experimental and jazz-centric hip-hop production from Corey and energy-filled yet at times emotionally present lyricism and rapping from Richie and Groggs, working with artists such as Vic Mensa, JPEG Mafia, and Amine along the way. On June 29, 2020, Steppa J Groggs passed away, and the future of the group, at least from the outside perspective, was uncertain. About a full year after, through their website and social medias, they announced their next project. They go into detail of the origins of the album's sound and how they were laid back in actually 2019, and also how this project was molded by the personal turmoils the members of the group faced during the 2020 pandemic. They also shared that the title was chosen by Groggs himself, being a repurposing of Isaac Hayes' rendition of By the Time I Get to Phoenix, as well as sort of their purpose or intent with this album, which was also from Groggs, to make some weird shit. On By the Time I Get to Phoenix, Injury Reserve finds themselves their most experimental, abstract, abrasive, and to simply put it, sonically strange. It's also an incredibly emotional, introspective album, be it that emotion anger, sadness, loneliness, melancholy, desperation, love, or hopefulness. Now, those last two emotions are a bit different, and there's a reason for that. Listening through the album as a whole, there is an unmistakable mental journey Injury Reserve goes through with each song. As I try to describe that journey and how I think each track fits into it, I don't want to exactly say that it's some sort of mirroring of the hero's journey or the 7 stages of grief, but I do want those things in the back of your head as we enter the strange world of By the Time I Get to Phoenix. The opening track, Outside, starts with a sample from a rap battle, along with sci-fi beaming synths and glittering sounds that just start off as a flicker. Richie formally introduces the album with what I would describe as an interrogative verse, emphasis on interrogate, for the first 2/3 of the song.
Take a seat, sit right across from me. Don't sit behind him. So you could just stalk him proudly. Let's cut all that bullshit. What's the elephant in the room? Let's talk to him. Come on, let's talk to him. Don't hide him. Yeah. But I walking in circles. You thought it was gonna be a walk in the park with him probably. But now you walk in the park. I with all that shoulda, coulda, woulda. I'm in your neck of the woods with the dogs ready to bark on them. Trying to big dog me. You can't little bro me.
Richie is talking to someone here, and that someone can be himself, it could be the listener, or some different adversary, where he takes a very accusatory tone and is almost berateful. You can even hear in the background his own lines repeating in a more muffled version, continuing that conversational aspect of the song. The lyrical content outlines the tone as Richie points to one's own skeletons, points out a shoulda, coulda, woulda regretful mentality, and points out an elephant in the room, and that we, whoever that we is, should talk to not ignore something important. Painting the dark tone of the album almost as a warning for the listener that things are going to get heavy. That although you might be outside of that kind of grim headspace mentally, Injury Reserve is going to take you there. Another way I can see the title is being outside of the fire of a forest, which leads into the last third of the song. Richie's verse ends and is replaced by frantic breathing and hyperventilating, all while the instrumentals grow into this engulfing, intimidating, yet beautiful arrangement. I take this many different ways, but I think it's safe to say, metaphorically or literally, that it revolves around a fire, the song. Our protagonist could be desperately running through a forest trying to escape a growing wildfire, running out of breath because of the oxygen being stolen from them. Or it could be someone running towards the fire, entering the heart of darkness, the eye of the storm, the brightest part of the fire, to maybe find an answer to the questions asked earlier in the song. The breathing stabilizes by the end, but the cloudy beeps in the background indicate that this is clearly just the beginning. Contrasting the slow, ominous buildup of Outside, Superman that throws a glass vase against the wall over and over again, in a chaotic harmony. Based around a sample from Athens, France by Black Country New Road, another group that I absolutely fell in love with, Superman that mixes the erratic jumping of the sample and additional, equally disorientating instrumentals with a very melodic Ritchie this time around. Lyrically, it continues the conversational lines, but specifically there are several lines here that directly point to karma, getting what's coming to someone, that someone is still not certain, a general uncertainty. Superman that also intends to solidify both the image of fire and of someone running. In an extended version showcased live, you see Ritchie continuing the theme throughout this extended verse. I also really enjoy the music video for the song, as it holds some hints towards understanding it. It taking place in a dimly lit room with someone sleeping, a window visible along with heavy rain just beyond it. Opposite of that, we see Ritchie being broadcasted to some sort of weird ITV thing where he performs in a foggy lit background. The music video flipping back and forth between the sporadic movements and colorfulness of Ritchie's side and the muted tone and low angle of the bedroom. Except one shot. There's a 1 second shot where you see what I think is not rain. Not the rain seen in the back for most of the video, but what I think might be snow. Snow, just like the snow that falls outside a home in Injury Reserves' North Pole music video, one of their most emotionally devastating songs they've made. It's the song that got me into them in the first place. This is the only shot like this. It's lower frame rate, it's slowed down. It of course is the same window as the bedroom, but I definitely believe this was put in here for a reason. And of course in the video there's also a shot of Ritchie wearing a headlamp running through an endless dark red, head on a swivel, seemingly directionless. We're in the fire now, so to say, as I like to think Ritchie points out with ain't no saving me or you. Alternatively, I sometimes imagine that Superman that is the musical representation for how fast a house fire can spread. The next song, SS San Francisco, starts off with a both catchy yet haunting guitar riff, introducing a distorted Ritchie and high-pitched Z loopers who is featured on the song. SS San Francisco is itself expressively more of a social commentary with its lyrics, almost hidden beneath the muddied vocals and rumbling instrumentals, its theme frequent throughout the entire album. Ritchie talks about feeling out of place and wanting to escape from a here, and later on explains his dissatisfaction with how he feels disenfranchised and discriminated against. It's both a sort of rebelling and surrender to these conditions.
They say it coming off shape and sizes, they can make it just for you, kid. They try to show me the floor plan, say it matter how big your bed is. Say you choose a 20, you can build a little studio where that shit is. 20 bands and incentives, and that just go depending on what your rent is. I don't think they get it. Hold up, I ain't finished. Auntie said she could go for 4 years and come back just breaded. Said they paying folks to keep it clean, everyone fed shit. Or you gon' wait on some Bruce Wayne ass nigga on some Alfred shit. Nah, more like Jeffrey Butler.
Richie talks a lot about money, about available housing being limited and small, rent eating up paychecks, working for the benefit of another person just to survive. So maybe the title SS San Francisco adds to this, as San Francisco being a hotspot for income inequality and having one of the worst housing markets in the country. The ship that Injury Reserve is riding on is sort of blueprinted based on San Francisco. As Richie outros the track with, "But what I know is I can't take it anymore, not anymore, no, 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 no." I see this track as a transitional track in the grand scope, fully solidifying the new quote-unquote hell we find ourselves in, all of it contrasted by the cacophony of the next song. Footwork in a Forest Fire explodes with rumbling, pounding drums, backing Groggs' first verse on the album. An extremely aggressive, almost taunting verse describing a chaotic, desolate landscape, questioning the ability of the listener to be able to survive the fire, asking, "Are you down to ride?" Richie jumps in both with a similar inflection but also flow. The track outros with the repeated line, "Let's see how your feet work, let's see how you roll," backgrounded by a monstrously low vocal groan and the instrumental becoming even more erratic in a way I'd describe as dismantling. Footwork in a Forest Fire continues a similar political consciousness from SS San Francisco. The album comes off the murder of George Floyd and the riots and general social unrest that followed, and the last two songs can be seen as Injury Reserve saying you need good footwork to survive the state of racial violence in America. In terms of the journey that I'm trying to outline, I see it as the first set of challenges, challenging the listener both instrumentally as it being one of the more experimental tracks, but also challenging lyrically by bringing up topics such as police brutality. The fire is at your feet now and you better dance to survive.
We're at ground zero with
While more muted, Ground Zero is both equally haunting and chopped up, serving as a nicer middle of a sandwich of roaring tracks. A sliding piano and knocking bass lays the framework for a very unhinged Richie verse, almost whispered as if talking to himself. The term Ground Zero being the recurring theme, it can be seen in many ways. It could be ground zero of the metaphorical forest fire, finally arriving at the point where it all started. But there's also an underlying COVID pandemic angle the song tackles, Ground Zero can also refer to the place where the pandemic began, and using a football analogy, Richie stiff arms people, keeping them at arm's length away, 6 feet away. There are also other iconography in the verse that hint at the pandemic with mask, sanitizer, or gloves. And lastly, Ground Zero can refer to how Richie sees himself as an influence to other artists, being the ground zero or original of his musical style, and is later explored later in the album. Ground Zero being the halfway point of the album I find really interesting. Not only does it work for my circular narrative theory, but it also ties into a sort of eye of the storm structure. Compared to the previous track and the one after, Ground Zero serves structurally to be a pit stop. You're still in danger, but in the midst of it, there is some respite instrumental-wise. Injury Reserve puts the listener through the ringer through these past 3 songs to illustrate a crumbling, dangerous environment. Ground Zero, Rock Bottom, along that the more darker topics on the album. So that means the only way is up and out of this here, but it's going to be hard. And it's going to take a lot of work. Smoke Don't Clear I'd like to refer as full. Stuffy, rumbling instrumentals, booming, muffled, yelling vocals for the catchy chorus, introed with I see it as how the trauma has opened an emotional door about Groggs' death, racial violence, or the pandemic, and how the smoke don't clear, referring to how hard it is to deal with that sort of baggage long term. Going into the verse, Richie describes how hard it's going to be to pull yourself out of the spot, the fire. It's all uphill from here, you better pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's time to get out of the fire, and the fire is fighting back. It's not going to let you leave before you resolve some things. Escaping trauma isn't easy and can't be forced, but it needs to be confronted nonetheless. Remember on Outside when Richie said, "What's the elephant in the room? Let's talk to him, come on." About how there's something that needs to be addressed. There's a theory that I've read that the absolutely haunting, wailing vocals that outline topics for you are distorted elephant cries. Elephants being one of the few animals on Earth besides humans that mourn the dead. Alongside a smothered, scattered piano, Richie uses a music app song algorithm angle to address the loss of Groggs.
Look across the table, I see a lot more than what appears to be a shadow. He walks across a room, I see a lot more than seems to be patterns. I scan the room, I see bits and pieces of you scattered. It's those same patterns that gon' get us through the next chapter. Your blood run through this home and your habits do much after. Grab the remote, pops up something you would've watched. I'm like, classic. This is some shit I would've seen you watch and it just laughed at. Your patterns are still in place and your algorithm is still in action. Yeah. Just working so you can just jump right back in. But you ain't jumping back. Yeah, just run it back.
Both pointing out how he still sees Groggs' influence on the world around him, reminding Richie of him, but is still partly in denial of his passing. Still expecting him to just be there, as Groggs was just a commonality in his life. One now that Richie maybe retrospectively took for granted. He is trying to take solace even in just watching something Groggs would enjoy. The song outros for a full minute and a half with a high-pitched synth laid out similar to human speech patterns after Richie seemingly intros a Groggs verse that just isn't there, illustrating a feeling of emptiness, that something should be there but isn't anymore. The wails seem to calm down near the end, almost subsiding, but there's still a strained texture at the end of the track.
Can you hear me now? Is this thing on?
5G. We put towers up everywhere. 5G.
Can you hear me?
Wild Wild West replaces those smooth synths with a similar sliding drums in a razor-sharp jittering arrangement, as a paranoid Richie and other voices take their turn in laying out the scene. One with 5G towers looming over both deserts and space. Wild Wild West can be taken as the actual Wild West of cowboys, but can also be a substitute for the internet, the World Wide Web, and how Injury Reserve has grown in part because of the internet, but also how the internet has changed into something much more dangerous in the modern day, coupled with references to modern topics related to it, such as Cybertrucks and the aforementioned 5G towers, the latter underlying a conspiracy theorist angle. The maybe unfamiliar voice at the beginning saying, "Is this thing on?" belongs to Steve Albini, a fellow musician, sampled from The End of Radio, an album that seems to tell the story of a radio DJ being the sole survivor of a nuclear holocaust, which aligns with the apocalyptic imagery of the entire album and crazed attitude of our MC. The references littered throughout Richie's quote-unquote schizoanalytical approach shows many possible inspirations for Injury Reserve. Will Smith and Men in Black, the Silver Surfer, and possibly the Beastie Boys, even references Nicki Minaj off Kanye West's Monster.
It's Willie Smith with the expected gadget. Yeah, I'm no rat with the intergalactic.
I'm on that 5G, one click kinetic, high speed, the triple shot, selling the hatchet. My whip got the horses moving, all you do it. AI, stop truck and run them through them. The talk, same color as Willie Walker's movement. Crime stop with the crime stop.
All influence, fame, and inspiration are also common themes throughout the album. I first pointed it out back in Ground Zero, and it's in the next song in Postpostpartum. Unlike most of the album preceding it, Postpostpartum and the last leg takes a turn sonically, as the stretched bass line and swinging flow and the cacophony before it. Richie sings throughout the track, his voice echoing through the trailing piano.
Don't you know? Yeah, I was hurting from birthing niggas. Shit, got into my mental, yeah. All these little lowercase t's on instrumentals, oh please, just gonna be gentle, yeah. Drawings from my stencils, seeing all the itty bitty knees, all about start to tremble, but see, why am I salty? Shit, I should be honored, but now they running laps around me. See, that's the problem, you see. I'm just doing my thing, but then they profit like bees. To a pollen, now see, you see my problem.
Talking once again about being an influence. Postpartum referring to the period of time after childbirth that is commonly accompanied by feelings of sadness or emptiness. Thus, postpartum can be seen as Richie acknowledging he's the source of many appreciators or copycats, but also feeling threatened or taking advantage of. All of this is complemented by a Groggs refrain. That Groggs chorus serves as the bridge to the second half of the song, which is more of a view of introspection.
I'd rather burn at the stake than boil in a pot. But you gotta pull them from the roots when you pull the plug. I pull it low tar. It's been a blessing just to see you grow. But soon as you see red, I should've seen red shit. You already know. Tried every angle, turn over every stone shit. One more to please, it just turned to my season. All fall down to your feet, nigga, Geronimo. I have my arms to the sea, but now they got it close.
The birth referred to in the title can also be the birth of themselves as studio artists, this being the album after their first studio album, the self-titled release in 2019, and could be connected to a wave of depression or pessimism afterward. The line, "I'd rather burn at the stake than boil in a pot," I feel can be seen through many angles. Richie may want to be seen as unique through any means necessary, being okay with being ostracized or burned at the stake. The second part of the line I see as a play off the phrase crabs in a bucket. The observation that crabs in a bucket, or pot in this analogy, will pull each other down if they see one trying to escape, which connects to Richie talking about similars eating at his fame or success. Lastly, postpartum can be about growing up, as that's the period after being born in a stretched sense, and the melancholic feelings attached with it. I see postpartum largely as the full confrontation of injury reserve about itself as a group, an idea, a trio of friends throughout the last couple years. It's another step out of that dark hole, that journey that has been outlined throughout the album. The next song being the biggest step. I got put onto injury reserve with the release of their EP Drive It Like It's Stolen, and in the year afterwards I was able to see them live at Slim's in SF on May 4th, almost exactly 5 years by the time I'm writing this. It was an amazing show, opened by the also amazing JPEG Mafia. I remember bouncing like crazy to All That Money or silently swaying to Groggs' performance of North Pole. They even used these money guns to shoot fake $20 bills with Harriet Tubman on them. I still have some of them today. And with their self-titled album that rollout, I remember that to a T. Jawbreaker and Corona and Lime are fucking bangers, man. The same year that Groggs passed away, that venue, Slim's, permanently closed. I didn't catch them on their latest tour, for by the time I got to Phoenix, I think I was just busy then. I guess what I'm trying to say is that 2020 really did change a lot, and I guess I might also still be recovering from everything that happened then. But these next two songs that close out the album, really, for me at least, when they came out, showed me that there is light at an end of the tunnel. My emotional attachment to By the Time I Get to Phoenix opens up extremely while thinking about my relationship to their other works and how my life was then compared to now, thanks to these last two songs. And lastly, I've had this video cooking for a while, and At the day of me writing specifically this sentence, injury reserve as a name has been retired. Richie and Parker now going by the name By Storm. So if they can move past this, whatever this is, then I should be able to too.
Knees hurting when I grow, and that's a tough pill to swallow, because I'm not getting taller.
Knees is just such a beautiful song, man. Its skeleton is made up of a black MIDI sample, a glorious but maybe grieving guitar placed out like the song is breathing. Its rise and drop both signifying having room to breathe within the space of the album, but also the more calm mood for the song itself. It's a very minimalist instrumental compared to the rest of the album, but still has those ghastly synths we've seen throughout. It's just that they feel soothing. Similarly, Richie still has all the motion he's had, but it's a whole new swirl of inflection involving melancholy, nostalgia, regret, and almost what I'd like to describe as anxious hope. In this first half, Richie delves into not feeling mature enough or having trouble growing into adulthood, led by the line, "Knees hurt when I grow, and that's a tough pill to swallow," hinting about topics of financial responsibility, falling behind, or simply not feeling tall enough or being tall enough, both literally and maybe figuratively. Even "That's a Tough Pill to Swallow" can be about how kids find it difficult swallowing pills for the first time, or experiencing life-changing events such as death.
Things I ain't knowing yet, things I ain't growing in.
Oh, don't worry, you gonna grow into those babies.
Who don't want mine, but ain't
Go
give me
ahead.
if I ain't knowing
Just
it.
try them out. Put them on.
I ain't all the time. I don't think I'm growing anymore. I don't think I'm growing no more. I don't think it's snowing no more. Don't feel it in my bones no more. I ain't too cool for no more. I ain't out to speed like that. I've been out the loop, so hold up, shit, I'll be right back. This record's in the trash for sure. Yeah.
Richie feels lost with expectations not fulfilled, whereas in Groggs' verse he goes into alcoholism, a common topic in many of Groggs' verses, and how badly he sees it affecting his health, but also how hard of a time he's having trying to quit, giving a new meaning to knees hurting as a more general insert for health.
I can't even grow no more. Well, at least not vertically. But all these bottles that a nigga been killing got my stomach a little bit lower than it's supposed to be. Yeah. This last one is my last one. Shit. Probably said that about the last one. Probably gonna say it about the next two. Fuck it, nigga, at least my dreads grew. Watch me swing on them. Yeah, watch me. My knees hurt 'cause I'm grown.
His version of the title line is "Knees hurt 'cause I'm growing." At first I thought he said grown, instead singing about how he copes in adulthood and the effects that has had on him, but the lyrics say grown, as in growing. I absolutely love this small distinction, as Groggs, despite him referring to his alcoholism, also sees it as something he's working on. And I don't mean to speculate on the cause of his death, but it also makes it even more devastating, this being Groggs' last verse on the album. It's him telling the group to look forward with hope. The music video has Richie and Parker sitting solemnly on a stage as lights blare in the back in line with the beat, and as Groggs enters, so does his shadow, standing confidently, mic in hand, but only visible in flashes, but still lively as ever, which can also be Groggs telling his two best friends to stand tall even in his absence. Knees, by the end, I wouldn't say dies or breaks down, but gets taken apart, sonically slowing down as the guitar disappears, and in the video the lights fade into the same red light we saw in Superman that. This time with a new meaning. Instead of a fiery blaze, we can now see it as a warm glow. For the journey, there's still a lot more grieving and sadness to be had, but that's a good normal feeling to have. It's just always important to have that goal or hope that things will get better. As we finally leave that dark, fiery place in our mind created by trauma or stress, it may never fully leave us, but as we learn to live with it, we get better. As the skies above may be clear of smoke or smog, it may get replaced by a storm. See it as something to help put that fire out as we head into the last song of the album. Brian Eno is an artist I'm not too familiar with, but from what I have listened to, his ambient work is incredibly soothing and uplifting at times. Here Come the Warm Jets specifically is sampled here, a bit sped up, but it still rises up a very strong emotional reaction from me. And when I first listened to this track, and something that I never not notice each time I do listen, is what is added beneath that sample. The sound of cars and the sound of rain. As the sample rides for almost a full minute before any words are spoken, you can hear the muffled sounds of rainfall, of what sounds like a turn signal and car horns in the distance. In my mind, I see an intersection being drowned in rain, and if you'll allow me to be figurative, I see a crossroads, and if you'll allow me to be corny, then I see the end of Fast and Furious 7. It's saying goodbye.
It brings a pause, but damn, nigga, it really. By storm, I know I'm on. Yeah, won't show everything. The show must go on. The show must go, man. Show must go on. Shit, I don't know. It brings a pause, but damn, nigga, it's really pouring. It brings a pause, but damn, nigga, it's really pouring. Shit, we got caught by storm, and we ain't even know it. To you, this shit knee high. To him, it's to his shoulders. I see what gravity did to my pop shell. It broke me. I told my cousin that ain't him. She said, shit, I know that. I see my anchors break down. I don't know how to hold that. There's only so much two arms can truly hold it. Everybody got that one and keep the rest in orbit. But who gon' hold it down when that rock can't take no moment? It rains and pours, but damn, man, it's really pouring. They said you're cold, but damn, man, shit, I don't know, man. We laugh, we joke, cause man, that's just how they want it. It rains and pours, but damn, nigga, it's really pouring.
Richie's verse is the conclusion of the mental journey that has been going on throughout the entire album. With its depiction of cold rain, that Richie says, it rains and pours, but damn man, it's really pouring. The sample of Here Come the Warm Jets betrays that initial impression of sadness and paints the song with its own optimistic glow. Richie thinks about everything they've rapped about so far, be it racial discrimination, a global pandemic, mental health, introspection about their place in music, or maybe just coincidentally, who knows, a good friend's passing away. I kinda hate having to use the word trauma so much in this video. I can't really think of another word to use, so it kinda dilutes its meaning. But one last time, I would like to use it. As trauma can sort of keep you in a certain bad spot in life, making it very hard to move past it. It can be a red light, a stop sign. And I think that By Storm, with its car sounds, also serves as the green light, allowing you to move on. By the time I Get to Phoenix tells you that, sure, a storm might be pretty bad, but it sure as hell beats a forest fire. And that's my interpretation of By the Time I Get to Phoenix. To sort of come clean, I am technically wrong about most of this. Top Picks for You by Storm. A majority of the album was made while Groggs was alive and well. This is simply the feelings I got while first listening, and I'm going to stick to those interpretations, because ultimately I am amazed at how Injury Reserve ordered and organized the album. The songs can have detached meanings on their own. It's a very open album. But together and in this order, they create an amazing story that I love to experience. Thank you for watching. Injury Reserve means much to me in many ways, and I've had this album on my mind since I first listened to it. Please consider liking this video, subscribing, and checking out my other videos. It would mean the world.